Hello and welcome to another XR for Europe LinkedIn Live event. This time we are hearing about and recapping the XR Expo event that recently took place in Stuttgart. I am joined today by David and Silke. David is the CEO and founder of MindPort, and Silke is the director of XR Hub Bavaria. They were both attendees. I was not an attendee this year, shame on me. But fortunately, I have friends and colleagues who did go. And they are going to tell me and tell you, the audience, what they saw, what was noteworthy, and what you missed if you weren't there. If you're watching us live, you can post your own questions into the comments. Maybe you can share what you saw, what you thought was particularly stand out and noteworthy from the conference or the trade fair, or ask questions of our audience, not of our audience, sorry, of our speakers, about what it is, for more information about what it is they saw. Perhaps they saw something great and you'd like to follow up. And so, maybe ask some more details if you need about what they saw. We hopefully will also be joined shortly by Luis, who had a slight technical delay. But let's go ahead and get started. So David, Silke, in that order, please let me introduce yourself. Tell the audience who you are and what brought you to the event.
I was first, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it usually ladies first? But okay.
Well, I go in alphabet.
I should go first. Anyways, so I'm founder and CEO of MindPort. MindPort is a high-tech startup founded in 2021 in Germany. And we are the developers of VR Builder, which is an open source authoring system for the creation of VR applications with a specific focus on VR training.
And Silke?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Silke. I'm the head of the XR Hub Bavaria. We are a government-funded project to support the XR community in Bavaria and beyond. So we try to connect our community to other people globally. We work together with universities, with developers, and also with applicants and future applicants. So we also try to make people aware of all the great possibilities that you have using XR technologies.
Excellent. Now, so first question, was this your first XR Expo? I mean, I know the answer, but I'm a surrogate for the audience. Was this the first time you went? When did you learn about the event? What encouraged you to attend it this year? Okay. And that can be for anyone. Silke, maybe you. Yeah.
Okay, so I can start. So no, it was not my first time because we have been following for a long time what Christoph and his team of VDC Fellbach are doing. And we like to support them, and so we try to be there every year, and we almost managed to be there every year. So we have seen the event going from the Chamber of Commerce in the center of the city to the expo where it took place this year.
Yeah, and for the audience who may not be familiar, this is you're referring to Christoph Runde of the Virtual Dimension Center. Fellbach there. So they're, I think, the lead organization there. And David?
Yeah, for us it was the second time. So we also attended last year. And one of our main motivators was actually the CARS initiative. So it was focused on startups. And they had a great offer where they supported startups. So we were part of this cohort. And we're also allowed to also then have a 10 minutes pitch on the stage as a CARS supported startup.
Okay, great. And actually, this is perfect timing because we just started, and we have Luis with us. He's in the background room, so I'm going to bring him on screen here in just a moment and ask him the same question. Luis, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and sorry for being late.
No worries. No, we literally just got started. So David and Silke had just introduced themselves and also talked a little bit about what brought them to the event and why they attended and if they'd been there before. So please take a moment, introduce yourself to the audience and talk a little bit about is this your first XR Expo? And if not, what has been your experience? What brought you there this year?
Yeah, it was my first experience. Well, first and foremost, hi everyone. Hi Silke. Hi David. Thanks for having me, Michael. It was, yes, my first XR Expo. I have been working in XR since 2014. So I believe XR Expo started around 2018, 2019, and haven't had the opportunity to join. I am right now collaborating with the XRSI Europe, which is a standards development organization for privacy and safety in immersive spaces. And XRSI actually had a workshop in the last edition of XR Expo. So I believe it was Valentino, our president, and Alina Kadlubski that were guiding that workshop in the last edition. And my expectation for this one was that it was going to be pretty much I was curious to know about how the European business-to-business XR was going to react to everything that was happening regarding what we see in the news with all the Meta going or stepping off the metaverse fields, and pretty much everything not, let's say, driving XR into the limelight. So I was very curious to see what was going to happen. And at the same time, I also had several key partners also here in Portugal that were going to attend. So I was also driven by that. And yeah, overall, it was pretty much that led me to XR Expo. So for me, it was, I truly believe that we really need to have a business-to-business focused XR and virtual worlds event in Europe.
Great. So it's good that we have this range of experience. We have those who've been there for a while, those who maybe participated more this year than in previous years, in David's case, and then Luis, your first time. So I can say that I went for the first time last year, was not able to go this year. So, last year, for those who didn't go last year, it was this real, I think, scale up. It was a perfect storm of opportunity in the region. And so it became such a major event, and it stood out to me for this trade fair, for how large the trade fair was. So maybe first, David and Silke, having been there before, what makes this year, how does it compare with previous editions? Is it on similar scale as last year? Is it focusing more on, a specific, business-to-business focus or conference or standards? How did it stand out this year to you compared to previous years?
Yeah, so it clearly has a B2B focus and an industry focus. So the creative sector is not, not really what this event is all about. And then compared to last year, so last year it was huge, but that was due to an extraordinary funding that they got. So I think this year it was more a reasonable size and a stable size. It was very professional. It was a great expo in this expo area, which was really nice. And so we also had a booth from the XR Hub. So we brought together all our three locations into one booth. So for us, it was also nice to unite in person with our colleagues there. So overall, I think this is now the size that will be maybe the starting point for future years, and I think the expo will grow from that.
And can you kind of put a range when you say a stable size for the future? What are some numbers you can maybe estimate there?
Yeah. So this year there were 61 exhibitors and about roughly 1,000, up to 500 visitors. So I think that's a good size, but of course there's potential for growth.
Yeah, I mean 60 plus exhibitors that's a significant number. Yeah. David, can you talk a little bit about how it maybe stood out from previous years, particularly because there's this startup focus you mentioned this year?
Yeah, so maybe also for those who don't know XR Expo, and you both mentioned this already, this special situation last year. I mean, last year they had this great opportunity that they suddenly had to fill in a large area, right? And this was a great opportunity, but also since it was on a short notice, they basically had to fill also the space. And last year, you noticed this in many different aspects. So there was a higher diversity of participants, but also basically everyone could join and get a booth there. So for us, for instance, this was a great opportunity. We had a really huge booth in our dimensions. It was like 3 by 6 meters. And just for a small startup, this of course is a great space, right? Usually you have to pay several thousand of euros, and this was given us for free. And yeah, last year there were also lots of academia, researchers, universities. There were many people that worked in a slightly related field to XR. Also, the area was different. So you had several locations, and some you didn't even find if you weren't looking actively for them. So it was a great opportunity, but it also was a little bit chaotic, which had plus and also disadvantages, right? And this year, it was an intentional decision to go to Messe Stuttgart. So it was much mature, I would say, and also better organized. So you also notice how things are developing or evolving. And if you consider where XR Expo came from, I think it's a great trajectory. So last year, as a kind of fourth scale, you could say, a great opportunity, and now more intentional, maturing and growing.
Oh, thank you for that. I mean, that's it was very big last year, and
Yeah, very
took some
big, yeah.
took some exploration to.
They had suddenly huge shoes to fill, right? And they did their best, and it all went well. But in some areas, you notice that yeah, it was really a huge challenge for them as well.
So coming back now to something that Luis's motivation was to kind of see the representation of these macroeconomic trends that are impacting the space. He mentioned Meta and such. Can you guys talk about what was the feel among the participants, either on the conference side or in the trade show side, among the booths? What was the general, I guess, feeling there, and what were some of the talking points that you heard very prominently? I mean, if any prominent talking points came out. And that's open to anyone. Maybe Luis, since you were specifically looking for that, maybe I hope you found it. You found some of this there.
Actually, not exactly. So, well, at the same time, I did, in the sense that I was expecting that these big players were not going to be there, and that was confirmed. So these big players were not as visible as in past events or in other events. But at the same time, it was clear also to me that let's say, end user organizations, namely on the industrial and automotive areas, were clearly there. And it was also very interesting to see how far along they were. So that for me, it was very, very interesting to connect with large automotive brands. Actually, I spoke at the automotive meetup that happened during the event, and it was very interesting to see how brands like Porsche, brands like BMW at this point are not only, they're not thinking about how to leverage the technology, they're not thinking about how to pilot the technology, they're right now thinking how can we drive these pilots that already are there, that are already implemented, towards a production level, and to actually make a difference in this moment in time where the automotive industry is. So in that sense, I would say clearly seeing so many different end user organizations was very, very interesting. And at the same time, also seeing very diverse and engaged startups. Of course, yours, David, but not just yours, but yours is a good example, because it's it's great to see, because it's not just about software, it's not just about open source, it's not just about hardware. There was a huge diversity, well, not a huge, but a very good diversity of examples, and that, I believe, also speaks volumes about how intense the XR scene keeps on performing in Europe. So I would say those would be like the most the clearest highlights for me regarding the trade show.
And we also think that the research side was very interesting. So we had our colleagues with us from the University of Würzburg, and they had an interesting case study that they showed. So that was about avatar theft and how you can avoid that. And so they are recording the movements by people, and then these movements enable them to say whether the person is represented, whether the avatar is representing the person, or whether somebody else is behind it. So that was, I think, an interesting project. And the colleagues there, they said they had really good conversations and on a really high level, which was not the case in maybe in other events. So they were very happy. And I was also walking around a bit and talking to other universities, and I thought that it was interesting too.
That's a really interesting use case. Maybe we'll have to follow that up, because that's an application, right, of what is otherwise kind of a fear-inducing capability, which is to be able to identify a person based off of inescapably simple, tracking metrics. So that's interesting. Yeah, we'll come back to that. And David, what were some of the what was the sense and the feeling and the topics on the floor?
Yeah, I think you can notice two things, and the first one I would label maturity, and I would like to quickly take a step back, because if you think about XR, this is kind of unique in one way. If you think of the hype cycle, usually technology goes through this once. So you always have the hype, then you have to go through this throw of disillusionment, and then you go up again until you reach the plateau of productivity. And the funny thing about XR is that we have been through this now 5 times already through the different years. And we have been through this again, right? We had this metaverse hype, and just a year afterwards, there was this metaverse hype crash. And people were usually expecting that we would benefit from that. And from the hype, we benefited not at all, because there was lots of people now claiming that there is potential where there is none, that claim that they're expert even though they were not. And this created lots of expectations that could not be fulfilled. And if you were realistic about the potential, you were left behind because your promise was not as good as from the other people. And now we are on the other side, right? We are really lagging. And what you notice now at XR Expo as well is that everyone there had really realistic expectations. There was no one overhyped. And also the offering that you heard, that was all ground to earth, except for something, and this is exactly the second part. Artificial intelligence, of course, is a topic now everywhere. And you notice how this impacted the providers as well. So the ones who would try to now also, like they try to be innovative in XR, right, by adding artificial intelligence, and now trying also to create a story where you say, both are related or even the same. And I'm not sure about this. I have been following artificial intelligence for much longer than it was new or hip. I already learned about neural networks back in university. I'm also a chess enthusiast, and I've been following how chess computers evolved. I was already playing on chess computers when I was a child. So I learned, or I think I have a good understanding of how it evolves and what the potential is. And seeing many of the claims, some of this is just BS, to be honest. And again, it's somewhere that you have to be realistic, I think. But at the same time, you have some visibility competition from others who claim more that's possible. And I think this is kind of a challenging balancing act. And yeah, I think these two things, on the one side, maturity of XR in all areas, but on the second side, the impact of artificial intelligence in many different regards, including capabilities, features, but also market expectations. Those two things is what I would sum up are the most insightful things from XR Expo.
Yeah, I mean, I may slightly disagree with how often a technology has to go through these cycles, because I think, you know, for television and for telephone and for video, I think those technologies, from my understanding, did go through periods of hype, not too dissimilar from like the VR early 90s, late 80s, early 90s type of hype that it did. So I mean, it's just, they kind of fall into the background once it goes through its last one, and then it's an upward forever, or until it's replaced. But I think your point is, it's that's what I would expect from a more industry and a B2B focused event, is much more maturity, because, you know, right, the second B is supposed to be the business that's buying, which means they should have some sophisticated understanding of what it is that they're willing to buy, or how they're going to use the thing that they buy. So last year, what stood out to a number of us who had traveled there was that it was very much, it was very prominent, the local companies, and how many local companies there were. Really, how large for the region, for a single region, how large that ecosystem was. And I would think that perhaps this is also a contribution to maybe the maturity of this discussion, is that a lot of these entities would probably have known of each other already, or, you know, there might be some continuance. But can you guys talk a little bit about what was the balance of being very much an international versus a local type of a participation and focus of the event, and if anything, what did that add? Whether that was, again, more international, bringing it in, or really drawing a lot of attention to a very specific local ecosystem. That was, right, automotives, Luis, you mentioned, that's kind of one of the core industries of that region that would separate this event maybe from any other XR event, is not going to have a lot of automotive.
100%. No, it's actually really interesting that you referred this. From my experience, I would say it was maybe 50-50. So maybe more local entities, more local organizations, and then entities coming, international organizations coming in. But when I mean international, not necessarily European, well, some European for sure, but you could see people coming from China, people coming from India, people coming from Asia, people coming from the US. So very different providers coming from outside of the European Union, coming to like take the pulse, trying to see if they could do some business. And I believe that looking now into how everything is playing out, how the markets are also evolving, and the several different opportunities and markets and connections that are being established by the European Union now with, for instance, Mercosur, which is, for instance, for a Portuguese-speaking person like me, having the opportunity to connect with 200 million more in Brazil, for instance. It's really, really interesting, especially now that they have or we have like a parity regarding data and data privacy laws. So in that sense, I believe that there's going to be probably an increase in the coming years of international organizations leveraging also the power of these relationships moving forward. And at the same time, again, going back to what we shared before, I believe that we will still need to see how the major players within the business to business also play a role. And this regards, for instance, the headsets. And we also have European headsets, like, for instance, Varjo, that weren't there. and it would make sense to have these. We would need to have also the data centers. Well, there are several different players in the, let's say, XR tech stack that would be very, very interesting also to see at this event. And I'm pretty sure that in the next couple of editions we will be seeing them. So yeah, overall I would say that's those are the focuses, and that's the division, at least on the trade show. Participants, I felt like it was much more international than actually local.
Okay, thank you for it. Silke?
Yeah, well, for us, it's great to have this big B2B event in Germany, and then of course it's fantastic if it gets more and more international. I think this year there were participants from 25 countries, which is good, and yeah, and because we know the local scene quite well, and so when we start talking to all of them, the 2 days are already over. But it's great to have participants from other countries, and I was also happy to meet Luis in Germany and not only in Brussels or in other places. So that is really good, and I hope that we can encourage more people to come next year.
And David, maybe for you, because you have a product to sell. Yeah, what was that sense of international or balance? Yeah, new people.
Yeah, I'm trying to add to what has been already said. So the XR Expo is one of the largest XR events in Europe, right? I think it's number 3, depending on what you count as XR trade fair. But despite that, compared to other big events or large events, it's quite small, right? So, and I think this has an impact also on who is attending. And if you're looking just at the exhibitors, I think most of them were from Germany or even local from the area. If you are thinking of the attendances, I think this was much more international. And I think we will talk later about this as well. The XR Expo, that has a conference area and an exhibition area. And I think in the conference track, the diverse or the internationality was much bigger. And I think this is also clear because academia is more international. And if you are also looking at the attendance or the exhibitors, they were usually smaller or medium-sized enterprises. So, and they often do local business more. So I think it's in the matter of things. And yeah, these are the elements I would sum up.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year, just because you mentioned the conference, and yeah, maybe we'll talk a little bit about what people heard, and if anything, because you can't be in 2 places at once. So if you're in a booth, it can make it difficult to get over to the conference. But last year I had the opportunity to speak in one of the panel discussions, and it was noteworthy, the language, the impact of language. Because when it was predominantly German speaking, the conference, and when the speaker were speaking in German, of course, the stadium, because it was at the arena, rather the Porsche Arena, was closer to full, 200 people easily, 200-300 people. And when it was in English, particularly not as like one English speaker in the middle of 2 other speakers speaking German, then we might get down to 30 people. You saw the impact of language quite strikingly last year, which I think is always it's normal, but it's the kind of thing that sometimes it surprises people. But all these events are local, because that's who's able to come for the most. So what I think is interesting, and I'll ask you maybe, I don't know, just to share some more insights about if it's more the internationals coming to buy, or I think, David, as you mentioned, internationals were more like the small, medium enterprise, they're coming to sell. But that can be challenging when you have an event that is predominantly exhibiting local products. Of course, what they want to bring is they want to bring in international buyers for their, and we see this with Match XR. We see this with a lot of events that have the support, the mandate or the motivation to support local business. It's a very difficult balance to make. Normally you might do something in Barcelona or in Paris or Berlin. Or you say it's such a big event, local, foreign, it doesn't matter. We want, we don't have as an organizer that type of regional focus. But I think usually for most events, there's a strong regional. It's public funding, so it's a challenge to balance how much they want to promote and put on show products from outside the region, knowing that they might actually be competing with local. So I don't know if you guys just, not a specific question, but just from my last year, understanding where would you like to see it go next year, based off of what you saw this year? And again, specific to the trade show, maybe where would you like to see next year it grow, to try to better serve this B2B purpose?
I think it would be interesting to have some bigger companies exhibiting what they are doing, because the big automotive companies, they didn't have a booth. So companies like those, or for instance, I went to the Hanover Fair, and there Siemens basically had a whole hall full of all the recent developments, and of course it would be nice to have some of them in the XR field to be represented at the XR Expo.
Yeah, that's a good example, because Volvo from Sweden, but that's one of the few car companies you will see, and usually it's very specifically one person who's often representing some of the immersive projects and internal pilots. But yeah, you don't normally see a lot of this. All again, one of the challenges to getting the companies who are developing these pilots to go and showcase, because if it's just a pilot and it's not fully implemented, like what is the benefit? We were talking about this in a recent event, that in the US you'll see companies more likely to promote an internal pilot as a bit of brand building, and you just don't quite see that as much in Europe. Companies say, well, we're trying something really interesting and new. It's not part of our main business yet, but it's something that we're still exploring. And I think that's I'd love to see that. Yeah, I didn't see that last year either. Luis, David, what, based on what you saw this year, what would you like to see towards the growing this B2B impact?
Yeah, I agree with Silke. So the large enterprises were obviously missing, and also in different regards. So it was, for instance, the large hardware providers who were missing. So not only the customer side of the large enterprises, but also the provider side of the large enterprises. So neither of the big brands that usually should be there was attending or showing what they are doing. And I think it's of course I don't know what the reason behind it is, but yeah, only seeing small or medium-sized enterprises there, I think this ecosystem only works together with everyone involved. And if large enterprises are missing, then this is a dangerous signal. And yeah, I think it would be really good if in the next years those large enterprises then show up on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. And Luis, probably I'm going to assume you would support that same type of that hope that, like, the Picos and others exhibit.
Well, yeah, for sure. The issue is that, as we all know, the hype wave now is much more taken by AI and AI-related topics. So it's kind of hard for some of the organizations that actually have also XR-related projects and processes ongoing to come out and to promote them, because they might get entangled into the downside metaverse spiral that unfortunately today we're seeing pretty much everywhere since Meta stepped out of its strategy. I would say I would like to see, for the next couple of editions, I would like to see first and foremost, more markets, because business to business is very, very big. For instance, I'm working in my day job. I'm working in this advisory network, and we're mostly working with the hospitality industry. And that's, for instance, one of the industries that is leveraging VR training. I wouldn't say the most, but that clearly has a benefit in leveraging that specific use case. And it has several hotel chains and cruise operators already doing their own programs, but they weren't present here. And alongside with them, I believe also several in the retail space were not in there. So there are several different sectors that I believe would be very, very interesting to see. And they exist because some of the, for instance, the local agencies that were exhibiting, they had all the logos there as customers. They just were, well, not actually not actually participating as exhibitors, at least these brands. Another thing that I'm seeing is that there are like a lot of different markets that want to connect with our space, our European economic space, like for instance Korea, like, well, several different spaces. And I believe it would be interesting, and there are several events that already do this, but at a broader level in Europe. I would say that it would be interesting to have like a more concrete and very, let's say, segmented approach to try and create like bridges in specific sectors with these markets. So business to business bridges that would allow for XR, for instance, in automotive to be also bridged, for instance, with Japan. I'm seeing Japan could be like any other economy, trying and bring in to XR Expo those kind of examples, and alongside with the examples also the brands and the stakeholders that are building up that space in different kinds of markets where we can actually also participate. And at the same time, mind you, most of these markets are always, or most of the stakeholders in these markets that come to the event, I don't think that they're trying to like sell directly. They're trying to find partners that can act on their behalf, or with whom they can like integrate with, in order then to have an experience in the European market. So again, having maybe some formats inside the event that would facilitate that, or that could facilitate that, I believe that would serve the matchmaking and the overall results from the event itself as a lead generation engine, let's say. Finally, I would say what we're seeing in several different places across Europe, and in several different programs, research programs, and not only research, overall programs, public funded programs, we're seeing digital twins coming up. And it was not, although it was implied in several of the products and services that were showcased across the exhibition floor, I believe it would be also interesting to have a more, let's say, clear focus and maybe a clear approach to these technologies and how they relate to immersive technologies, namely when we're talking about Cityverse and local digital twins, when we're talking about simulation, when we're talking about so many different approaches to heritage, to, again, different layers of the market, which by themselves also relate to business relationships. So yeah, I would say those would be like the three wishes for Expo in the future.
I mean, it sounds like just bigger and more diverse is how I might sum that in a single description. And you mentioned that having these specific programs linking other markets. I mean, I think what United XR and some other events have done is have like these national pavilions, which comes more from, I think, the festival concept. I mean, you see it actually in Gamescom as well, Silke. I know that you have lots of these specific national programs, but it's through, there's a specific funding mechanism that kind of makes that possible. And I guess in this case, it is what is the outcome that the funder is going to have confidence will happen. For example, as David was mentioning, with if the profile of these companies coming from abroad are small to medium, then they're looking to sell either, if not directly, then through a local representative. They're looking to sell to right. So they have to think that can be facilitated. So the event has to kind of sell that and say, hey, if you're coming from Japan, there are German companies who are looking to buy some good Japanese or Korean solutions here, or there are people who are looking to sell your solutions because we want more competition in the space. It's like I said, that's such a challenging thing for a B2B event to do, to balance that. And I don't have any. I don't know. That's Christoph and other people who take that responsibility. But Silke, I know you do a lot to promote your region, in Bavaria, and so you have probably some of the same challenges. Any insights as to how to balance maybe that?
Well, I think you have to work with different partners, because especially on the foreign trade side, I think that like each region has their own support mechanisms, and it might make sense to work together with them. So to invite international delegations to come, and then maybe arrange for a program around the expo, for them to make it even more attractive.
Like a tour to meet local stakeholders in their particular industry.
Yeah, so I know that in Bavaria there are some programs that exist, so delegations can be invited, and then they get a program in the region, and then it might be good to connect it to the XR Expo as a big event, and then have something in addition to it.
Yeah, I mean, I know I would, Japan and Korea are good examples, but even within Europe, as XR for Europe, it's something we'd love to see. More companies coming from Portugal, for obvious example, but also Poland, from the Balkans, from the Baltics. It's still sometimes I get the sense that Japan and the US is seen similar to Poland or Spain or another country in the Union. It's still the sense it's an international market. So I would love to see this event grow into that, but it's not easy. So maybe this is some homework for all of us who want to support the future editions of this event, is to think about how, from the countries and the regions that we are representative of, we can support this type of cross-border B2B, I guess, funded programs, locally funded programs, find a way to make this event that, because it's quite nice how centrally located within the continent. It's not too far away from a lot of the continent. But I'd like to, just conscious of time, we have a lot of comments, but we don't have any specific questions. So this is maybe a last second chance if anyone has any questions. But in lieu of that, what I'd like to do is to ask each of you to just mention one or two things that just like you saw, a specific technology or a specific product or use case, or maybe just a really good talk. One or two specific things that you saw that you're likely to remember next year. And that's whoever would like to go first is one of those things that they just really stood out in their mind, something that they saw someone else do.
Yeah. Well, I can start with one thing. I was moderating some sessions in the metaverse training section, and there was a trio from Austria, and they were doing some innovation work, and there was a lady, a researcher from doing social science on the future of work, and so they tried to introduce XR in companies, and they did some a study on the future readiness or innovation readiness of the companies, and they had developed, I think, a questionnaire on that, and I found that very interesting, because it's very hard for SMEs so we try to reach out to them as well and to tell them about the fantastic opportunities, but maybe it's better to have a broader look and not only focus on XR, but on their willingness to move forward and to transform, because at the moment everybody has to think about what they do with AI anyway. And so, yeah, integrated into a broader sense, and also the willingness of people to really adapt to changes.
Well, I mean, okay, you may remember that my my area of research back in the day was somewhat related to this. I'd love to follow that up. Yeah, if we can find out who was who was it that was presenting. I would like to follow that up because I think right, any XR project in a company is normally a change initiative, and so a lot of things have to be in the right place internally for a change initiative to be successful. So some type of metric. It'd be nice to have a list of companies in Europe that are ready for XR and just have it on a big board and everyone starts chasing the companies that are ready for this. Anyone else? Maybe David, your microphone's not muted, so you're ready to speak.
Yeah, I had to think a little bit about that, but I think two things stay in my mind. The first one is there was this avatar challenge, and many different providers shared their avatar, and again, artificial intelligence was one element of it. So I think it gives us also an outlook about what's going to happen, because those avatars don't only work in XR, but basically everywhere. And I think it will, or potentially can change the interaction of companies with their customers. So instead of having a phone call, you are interacting now with a virtual character. And I think the idea is pretty old, right? But the quality now got so much better that I think we are now over the uncanny valley. It does not feel weird now anymore to talk with these characters, even though you know that they are artificial, but they are so human-like now that it doesn't feel as bad as it was before. So I think this is one of the elements. And the second one is I like technology, right? So even if I don't see the concrete value yet, if the technology is cool, I like it. And it was actually the startup directly opposed to our booth. And they had a system that basically scanned the 3D environment of you and turned it into the virtual world. So they had some kind of texturing mechanism, so that whatever the shapes are that you had in front of you, those turned into virtual elements. So for instance, the table that they had at their booth, this became then a kind of a block, but in the style of the virtual game or of the virtual world. And of course, you can see how this can influence games a lot. If you have now that you can actually interact with your real living room, and if there's a couch, then it starts to become something different but of similar shape, right? And then you can interact with it in the virtual world as well as a physical object. I think this has a great opportunity for some fun game mechanics. I don't know if it has any value in B2B, but it was a very cool technology that I really enjoyed.
I mean, I can imagine some application. I mean, that's actually something I did write just recently, an article, because I had presented on this last year, this algorithmic design. I do think that's the future of not just gaming, but almost any type of, immersive digital experience. You will have to know, I mean, you can't know as a designer what the physical topography is around the user. So you'll have to create these components that can map onto them. And then because otherwise, how do you make an immersive experience for someone, mixed reality or not? So yeah, I mean, feel free if you remember the name, we can pop it in the comments later if who that particular exhibitor was. And then maybe Luis, you've had a little bit longer now than the others to think of your answer. What is the one or two things that kind of stood out for you that you'll remember?
No, I do, but unfortunately, maybe it's in my age. I also don't remember the names, but overall, no, I would say I do remember two highlights, and these I would like to bring in. The first one regards to the panel the panel of the meetup, automotive meetup, in which I participated. And it was very, very interesting to see in the same panel. So the brands, the integrators, and someone like me that works a bit more with the regulatory backdrop of everything, and that pretty much is, let's say, the pain that sometimes both the brands and the integrators have to deal with. So And it was very, very interesting, the level of conversation, the level of discussion that we got in that panel, because at some point it was almost candid, the kind of responses and the kind of discussions that we were having there, because everyone agreed that the pilots were there and that the KPIs were met, and that there was visible impact being brought in by these pilots. So why not move forward? Why does it not accelerate? Why does adoption still being hampered, and by what, right? So we were exploring the several topics, but at the end it was very clear that it was not due to money, it was not due to lack of investment, it was not only due, let's say, to mindset. Something very, very interesting that it was also not due to regulation, but it was very, very interesting to see that everyone kind of agreed that the process management, the change management involved was sometimes too heavy to be planned and to be conducted in a way in parallel with everything else, because the market is also changing at a rapid pace in so many other different areas. So it's kind of hard to justify yet another change to happen on top of those. So it was, in that sense, I believe it was very, very interesting to see and hear. I believe if this is possible, it was very, very, it was a kind of a cozy discussion to be had at a business-to-business event, which could be, which I find kind of odd, but at the same time, it's pretty much what I felt happening there. So that, alongside with also the very tested platforms that were present, tested in the sense that it was very visible where all of these inspection, auditing, maintenance, remote assistance platforms that were present at the event, it was very visible where they were implemented, where they were installed, or all the brands that were using them. So in a way, I believe that was also kind of reassuring, because at the end, the value is there and people are understanding it and applying it.
What you described from that conversation is actually what the Openverse project had a recent report that was published by IDC, one of the partners in that, which said the same thing, that the challenge is really to go from pilot to fuller implementation in Europe, because the KPIs are accepted, but there still is this significant hurdle and gap. And what I've considered in the past, when we talk about like policy, European policy, and maybe just one quick aside, and then we'll wrap up. But just as another opportunity to put it out there, I think that more support in more policy support and mechanisms should be for adoption, not for innovation as such. I think the ecosystem of providers is pretty robust. And the challenge that they face is that that companies look at, as you said, Luis, there's a lot of other things going on. And they look at the return on investment, not necessarily what that product is able to do. What's the effort? What are the potential obstacles and barriers internally that have nothing to do with that product, but have everything to do with just doing something different? So anything that can lower the cost benefit burden for the company, I think would be as impactful and more impactful than many of the supports that we have, which focus on SMEs. And that, David, is not to say that SMEs shouldn't be getting less support, but I do think that a lot more support needs to go for the adopters to encourage in some mechanism that they do actually ramp up from pilot, however that may look. So hopefully someone, we actually have quite a few people watching us live. Hopefully some of them are policy influencers. But on that, I would like to thank all three of you, David, Luis, Silke, for joining us, for sharing your experience, what you heard and what you learned from the event, not just with the audience, but with myself, because as I said at the beginning, I wasn't there. So I rely on you and my friends and colleagues to make sure that I'm not falling behind. So thank you very much to everyone who watched us live. Thank you very much for everyone who's watched us after the fact and got to this point. So a special thanks for you. And we'll see you with the next LinkedIn Live event that we will do, which will probably be another recap because we'll have Immersive Tech Week coming in June. I think many of us will probably be attending in one fashion or another. And if not, no worries. You'll be able to catch up with the recap event afterward. So thank you very much again, all three of you. And thank you for all of our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.